Thank you. Thank you very much, Colonel Arturo Ortiz, for the very kind introduction. And I'd like to thank the leadership of the Philippine Air Force for making me a part of this very laudable program, which we call the Philippine Air Force Leadership and Core Values Forum. And for this, I'd like to personally congratulate your Commanding General, Lieutenant General Oscar Rabena, for organizing this and for being a good leader, not only of the Philippine Air Force, but also the entire Armed Forces of the Philippines. I have known General Rabena for quite a long time. We spent a few years together when I was National Security Advisor, and he was one of the leading assistants of the Executive Secretary during that time. And we went through a lot of crises together in the palace, especially the Magdalo crisis in July 2003. And I would like to tell you that even as early as that, I knew that General Rabena had a very promising and bright career in the Armed Forces of the Philippines. And I'd like to congratulate General Rabena for his achievement as Commanding General of the Philippine Air Force. I have been asked to talk about leadership with moral courage, the key to a better change. And in this particular case, I would like to cite as a background, not my career in politics. Maybe I'll talk a little about politics, I'll talk a little about the military, a little about the sports, but I will focus a lot on my own personal experience as head of one of the largest agencies of the government today and during my time as Postmaster General of the Philippines. I'll be talking about certain values, but I will not be talking about patriotism, I will not be talking about integrity. I think these are things that are taken as a matter of fact. These are the basic ingredients of leadership, but I would not want to moralize on this. I think we all understand when we speak of integrity, when we speak of patriotism, we know what it's all about. The post office experience. You know, I was appointed Postmaster General at the age of 34. I was not even 11 years from, I was barely 11 years away from graduation in 1970. In fact, technically I graduated January 3, 1970, but I was appointed Postmaster General on June 1, 1970, so less than 11 years. And at that time, it was the largest and probably one of the most problematic bureaus of the government during that time, with 20,000 employees manning a huge central office and manning about 2,000 post offices all over the country. There was a post bank in practically every town, every municipality in the country at that time. It was a very extensive postal and government network. And at the time of my appointment, the post office was reputed as one of the most corrupt and the most problematic government agencies, and many of you probably were not yet in the government during that time, or probably just still cadets or recently graduated from the academy or from whatever school you came from. And during that time, letters and parcels were regularly lost. And when President Marcos appointed me as Postmaster General, he even declared that he was going to make me run what he at that time considered as a den of thieves. That was the headline when my appointment was announced in the newspapers. Now let me talk about some values that I think are very important in running an organization, in running people. And in this particular case, I consider it very important in your case, the Philippine Air Force, because I've always looked at the Philippine Air Force as one of the leading guardians and protectors of our economic resources. I've always been emphasizing that. The Philippine Air Force, together with the Philippine Army and the Philippine Navy and also the Philippine National Police, should be treated not as a military organization, not as a uniform service, but primarily as protector of our natural resources and our economic resources. It is my considered opinion that in your particular case, just like in the Navy and in the Army, you should be able to justify your budget, every page of your budget, by way of how you can contribute to economic development. Now let me talk about the first value that I consider very important. The first one is spirituality. I'm not saying that Roilo Golez is a very religious person. I have my own faults. I have my own problems with religion, for example. But I would like to say that I am a firm believer in spirituality. I'm a firm believer in the power of prayer. I am a devotee of Quiapo, and the reason for this is that my birthday, January 9, coincides with the Fiesta Day of Quiapo. For those of you who are familiar with the Fiesta of Quiapo, my mother was kind enough to introduce me to Quiapo during that time, and I cannot remember a time since I became a teenager where I did not pray in Quiapo when I would reach a crossroad in my career, either as a student. I would like to say that I prayed a lot for me to pass the entrance exams in the Philippine Military Academy when I took it in 1965. I prayed a lot when I was already in contention for final acceptance in the U.S. Naval Academy, and my prayers were answered. But of course, it doesn't mean that all your prayers are going to be answered. But what's important is that one must understand the power of prayer. And in my case, I remember when the President appointed me as Postmaster General, and I was about to report to the Post Office on June 1, 1981. I think you're all familiar with how the Post Office building looks like. It is probably one of the most imposing buildings in the Philippines today, very strategically located, commanding the Jones Bridge in that area. It's a very terrifying sight, even for people who are not about to handle and manage the post office at that time. I was about to report to the post office, but for some reason, instead of going directly to the post office, I made a left turn towards the Manila Cathedral. And I prayed hard, I prayed a lot, and I said, God, please help me. This is going to be a tough assignment for me. I'm only 11 years from graduation. I was only 34 years old at that time. And the President wanted me to run one of the most problematic agencies in the government. And I prayed. And as I said, one must believe in the power of prayer.